Welcome to Mindful Management, Creating a Trauma-Informed Work Environment, a podcast by Chefalo Consulting, where we share the knowledge, stories, and resources you need to create a trauma-informed culture that supports wellness, growth, and resilience. I'm your host, Shenandoah Chefalo. Welcome, everyone. So excited you're sticking around, joining our little podcast today, wherever you're tuning in from around the globe. We're super happy to have you with us. So on today's episode of Mindful Management, Creating a Trauma-Informed Work Environment, we are delighted to welcome Alexander Kjerulf, the renowned Chief Happiness Officer of Woohoo Inc. By the way, the company's name and title we're going to have to get into at some point. But he stands at the forefront of promoting happiness in the workplace. With a master's degree in computer science and decades of experience, Alex has evolved from a high-tech innovator to a global authority on workplace well-being. Through his several books, including an international bestseller, Happy Hour is 9 to 5, and his work with companies like Hilton, IKEA, and Microsoft, he advocates for environments where joy and well-being are the core of business practice. His current venture, HeartCount, aims to transform organizational cultures by ensuring employees feel valued and heard. Alex, welcome to our little program. We're so excited to have you today.
So great to be here, Shenandoah.
So this is an interesting journey for me because it looks like pretty early in your career, you were on the IT track. How did you move from IT to becoming a global happiness consultant?
My personal belief has always been that I want to work on stuff that makes me happy. Whatever work I do, I want it to be something that I actually enjoy so I don't hate going to work every single morning. And as a kid, I loved computers, so I went into IT. That was fun for a long time. I co-founded a tech company here in Copenhagen called Enterprise Systems. And then we sold that in 1999. And I was like, okay, now what do I want to do? And I realized that my true passion is not really IT, it is happiness at work. I've tried having jobs I loved. I've tried having jobs I hated. I think most people have, and I felt the difference between the two. And I realized that, liking what you do is so important. I was like, and I had some specific experiences from the company that I co-founded that maybe other people could learn from. So I studied the field, and then in 2002, I started doing talks and workshops on happiness at work.
I love that. So it's also good for our listeners to know that you're in Copenhagen, Denmark. And from a United States perspective, I think we always see every list that Denmark is at the top of countries around happiness as well. So I would take a guess that that also has something to do with this idea of being happy at work as well, the culture in which you grew up in.
Oh, absolutely. In many countries around the world, being happy at work is like a very strange idea. I gave a talk at the University of Boston University once. And there's like a guy in the audience raises his hand and says, well, of course I hate my job. That's why I get paid. And that is the attitude in a lot of places. But in Denmark, it's different. In Denmark, people just expect work to be nice. And if I hate my job, I'll quit and go find something better. And also in Denmark, we have a word for happiness at work, which is arbejdsglæde. And that word does not exist in any other language except the Scandinavian ones. So that shows you how much it's part of our culture that you should actually like what you do.
So I'm just wondering for you, what is maybe your initial approach when you first engage with a company? Because I know a lot of our listeners are going to be leaders at various places within large systems and organizations, but transforming culture is not easy.
Yeah. So whenever we work with a client, we try to give them three things. First of all, we have to give them the why. So why should an organization focus on happiness at work? And we can show them very clearly that, happy companies make more money. There's a ton of research on this now for any number of reasons. For instance, that, if your employees are happy, your retention is higher, your recruitment and training costs are lower, absenteeism is lower, innovation and creativity are higher, customer loyalty is higher. And so there are so many advantages, like specific hardcore business advantages to running a happy workplace. And we can also show that it's good for the individual employee, so that people who are happy at work are less stressed, they're less prone to burnout, they have better health. So this is where you start, right? It's by showing that happiness at work is not fluffy. It's not like an insignificant detail. It's super important. And happy companies get better business results.
Yeah. And I think that's interesting because probably here, I would say the late 90s, early 2000s in the United States with kind of the tech boom, right? Which kind of ties into you. When some of these companies were talking about playing ping pong or putting ping pong tables in workplace, I think a lot of companies get confused with the two pieces, right? Like, does happiness have to look like people are sitting around playing games? And there is a balance, I think, sometimes in there for a lot of companies, right?
Exactly. And that's the second thing we try to give companies is, so what can you do that actually works? Because you're exactly right. Ping pong tables and pizza parties and a gym in the office and yoga classes and that kind of thing do nothing. Essentially, I'm not saying you can ignore them if you're a tech company and every other tech company in your region has ping pong tables. You might need to put them in as well, right? But they are not what makes people happy at work. I actually went to the Google headquarters to talk to people there and figure out what made them happy at work. And nobody talks about the ping pong tables or the swimming pools. It's something else. So that's once the companies understand the business value, the second thing is, so how do we do this? And understanding what it is that makes people happy at work. And it's not perks. It's not promotions and pensions and bonuses and salaries. Those things need to be fair. I'm not saying we ignore those. But according to the research, there are like very fascinating models. And our model on what actually makes people happy at work is, we call it results and relationships. So results is that you get to do good work. You get to do work that makes a difference and you're appreciated for the good work you do. And then relationships is that you just basically feel accepted in the workplace, that you feel a connection with the people you work with, your coworkers, your boss. You don't all have to be best friends, but you do feel like you're valued, not just as a resource and a worker, but also as a human being. And we try to give companies like specific things they can do that will drive those two things.
Yeah, this is the backbone when we talk about trauma-informed environments here, where if I say it once, I'll say it 1,000 times. It's connections, 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 and more connections, right? And both the interpersonal connections, I want to know about you, I want you to know about me, but also then connection to the work, that I feel like the work is valuable in some way, that it's making an impact in my community and in the world. But the resistance, and I'm interested to hear some of the resistance and pushback that you get, Alex. I think the resistance that I hear is this mindset of, we don't have time for that.
Yeah, I hear that all the time.
Right? Like, to me, it's like, we don't have time. And I'm like, if you don't have time for this, you don't have time for anything else. Like, all these problems you're trying to solve as an organization won't get done because you're going to be managing the interpersonal problems of every employee that works here. But I'm sort of curious if you hear that, what sort of your response is, and perhaps what are the other common resistance points that you encounter from organizations and systems?
We don't have time is definitely the big one. And what I like to do is like to get very specific and say, okay, so your current absenteeism, employees are stressed and unhappy and unhealthy. Your current absenteeism rate in the company is maybe 12%. What if we could get that down to 3 or 4%? How much time would that save you every single day? That's not a hard calculation to make. So you can approach it from there. But I will say that for our work, specifically with happiness work, I say that the main resistance we face is just that people don't get it. People just don't see the value of happiness at work. And my main workaround for that is to just not engage with those companies.
No, I agree.
Yeah, you could break your heart trying to convince somebody who doesn't want to be convinced, or you could save your time and energy for the people who actually get it and can see why this has value. Also, as personally, if I worked for a company that didn't value my happiness, I could try to influence the company and that could be great. Or I could also just say, you know what, I'm going to quit and go work for a company that actually values me as a human being. So that's how we usually approach that. But also, I will also say that when you are, as I am, a chief happiness officer of a company called Woohoo, the people who approach you, they already get it.
Yeah, mostly they know what they're looking for, right? So we know that culture change and culture shifts within companies can take a long time because it's people, and depending on the size of your organization and commitment and all of these kinds of things. Can you maybe share with our listeners a case study or give an example of some significant cultural shifts that you've seen within an organization?
Yeah. And interestingly, I find that it doesn't have to take that long of time. So a specific case story, you work with the IT department of a big Danish insurance company. So there's just the IT team here are 400 people. So we started with a workshop for all the managers so they knew what was coming, and they had a very clear idea of what was going on. Then we did a keynote for all the employees to sort of get them on board. Like, this is what we're talking about. When we talk about happiness at work, what is it? What are the things that make us happy at work? Results in relationships, all of that. And then we did individual workshops for every single team, because every single team has, again, a different culture and different challenges in a different situation. And then we followed up with a closing keynote for all the employees, and then a closing workshop with top leadership in the IT team. And we delivered all of that in a time frame of like 3 or 4 months. But that was enough for them to get started on this process. And it was also enough to generate measurable changes. We do measure employee happiness at the beginning and at the end of a process like this, so we can see the actual results. And those results can be, because it's directly impacting how people feel about work, it has a direct effect, right? It's not something fluffy that, happens over here that may affect people or not. This is going to have a direct effect on how people feel at work pretty much every single day, and make their experience better. So people can experience the improvement almost like from day one in many cases.
I love that. So you mentioned something in there about measuring, and I think this is an important piece I want to talk to you about, because I think for many folks, this feels like the unmeasurable, like it's an untangible thing to measure. So I'm wondering if you might share with us some of the metrics or indicators that you find the most revealing, maybe about the health of a company's culture, but also individuals' feeling of happiness at work.
Sure. And just to hammer this point home, happiness can absolutely be measured. So specifically, I thought about how do you do that? And I thought that the typical way, the annual job satisfaction survey, that sucks. That is such a terrible way, because, all companies feel like they have to do it, and they're like 50, 75, sometimes 100 questions, and people hate filling them out. So what you have to do instead is you have to ask, questions that are relevant to people. And you also have to ask more often than once a year, because, how happy people are now is important now, but it can change. You could feel great today, you can feel terrible tomorrow. And asking once a year is just not enough. So I developed HeartCount. I came up with the idea for HeartCount, and it's being used by a lot of clients worldwide now, where people get 3 questions every Friday about their week. So we get like specific, tangible, current data on exactly how employees feel. And if you can see like this one team is now slipping in happiness, HR can go in and say, hey, what do we do about this? There's something wrong. We should act on that. Not in 8 months when we get the results from the job satisfaction survey, but now. Yeah, and all the questions are relevant. So we might ask questions. So the first question is always the same. In this week at work, how did you feel? But then we might ask about, how did you feel about working with your coworkers? Did you get the support and the support you need from your boss? Have you worked on meaningful tasks this week? Have you had enough time to complete all your tasks this week? Oh, and then on top of that, then you have business metrics. Again, absenteeism, retention, productivity, maybe something like quality of work or defects, maybe customer loyalty, employer brand, or just the brand of your product. Or these are all metrics that are super relevant for the company that are directly impacted by how happy employees feel.
I love that. Alex, do you recommend something different for smaller organizations or companies? Because I can see where, in your point about the Danish company where, the tech department is 400 staff members, how weekly surveys where people feel like they can be honest. But what happens in smaller organizations where people feel like, even though my name is not on this, you might be able to figure out who's responding, right? So is there a different technique for smaller organizations?
I mean, for small organizations, I would recommend talking to people and figuring out how they feel. But of course, if you have a less trusting culture, if the culture is not that positive and people don't feel they can be honest, that might be a problem. So one thing I've seen work, this is a consulting company in the UK. They did it with tennis balls. So in their entrance, there was like some tennis balls and then 2 buckets, and one said happy and one said unhappy. And on the way out the door, you could take a tennis ball, and if you had a good day, you could put it in the happy bucket, or else you could put it in the unhappy bucket. And then at the end of the day, somebody would count all the tennis balls and put it in a spreadsheet. And that would give them like a graph of how happy are we in this company. Because the numbers don't matter. It's what we do with the numbers that matter. So when you see something like that, you got to talk to people and then figure out, hey, what went wrong yesterday?
It's with that, what are some of the key tools or resources that you frequently recommend to folks to get started? So I tried the tennis ball method, and now what do I do? People are unhappy, Alex. Where do we start?
So if there's like one tool I recommend for people from the if one thing I think every organization should do is more positive feedback. And positive feedback is amazing because it's great for creating both results, a feeling of results and relationships. So the sad truth is that many people do good work, but they're very rarely told that they do good work. Of course, if they mess up, they're instantly punished in many workplaces. So what can work really well is positive feedback, because it creates that feeling of results. But also, positive feedback is insanely important for creating relationships. So if you notice my positive work and you tell me, it also shows that you see me and you see my positive sides, which is incredibly powerful for building relationships. So that is one of the most important things any workplace can do, is create that culture of positive feedback, where if you do good work, somebody will see and somebody will mention it to you. Somebody will tell you. What I've seen in many organizations is, okay, employees are not happy. What do? Let's build a gym. Let's put a gym in the office. And a gym is not going to make people happy. It seriously isn't. It's not going to work.
Rarely does the gym ever make anyone happy in any setting.
It really doesn't. It really doesn't. I spoke at a conference, an HR conference in Turkey, and I talked to this HR manager of a big multinational company in Turkey who said, their employees were not happy. So they asked the employees, what do you want? And the employees said, we want free food every day. And they gave them free food and they were still not happy. So they asked them, what do you want? And they said, oh, we want a gym. And they put in a gym and nobody went and they were still not happy. And they asked the employees, so what do you want now? And the employees said, we want a swimming pool. And the company was like, you're not getting a swimming pool. Those things, they just don't work. They're nice enough, but they do not make people any happier.
I love that, Alex. But I'm also thinking about some of the organizations that I work in, which by the nature of the job is a more high stress environment. Some of the organizations and systems I'm in, for instance, in the United States prison system, for example, some of those jobs by their very nature are more high stress. Is there a different approach when you might not be in an IT situation where, hey, we're just kind of thinking collaboratively and we don't really have a deadline. And when the idea comes to us, it comes to us, versus people who might be dealing with people who are having their own mental health issues, where there's outside stress that also embarks on the kind of culture that they get to have at work. They might not be working on their deadlines. They may be working on other people's deadlines. Is there other kinds of approaches? Because I think to your point, right, the connection piece, again, is still super critical, but are there other things we should consider in those environments as well?
I think it's about the same things, but even more so, because it really is about building up our resources to then withstand those stresses. But I will also say that if I can challenge the premise of that question a little bit, there's nothing that says that a prison needs to be an inherently stressful workplace. I challenge that premise. If working in an organization is consistently stressful, then we're doing something wrong consistently. Now, I know the prison system a little bit. A good friend of mine is actually a prison officer, and I actually did a workshop for a Danish prison and did a little bit of work with the Danish prison authorities. So I know those systems are tough. But even in Danish prisons, they actually spend a lot of time and effort building relationships between the prison officers and the inmates, so that there is a friendly, trusting atmosphere between those people. Having a good and effective prison system that rehabilitates prisoners is crucial for any society. People, if you need help, your coworker is going to be there for you.
Yeah. And I think there is something that you're heading on there. I'm thinking specifically about an organization that I work with in the prison system. And as I was even listening to you, I was like, it's the results piece. Because I think you're right. I think for each other, the team mentality is there, making sure we're all safe, making sure everyone goes home at night. Like that piece is there. But I do think what sometimes misses is that results piece. Like, are we doing anything, especially when you've been in that job for a long time and you've seen repeat offenders, or you've seen where the system has failed versus where it's been successful. And to your point, that idea of not having necessarily the positive feedback, here's all the places we might have not done a great job, right? And there tends to, in that system in general, and I don't mean for these specific clients, I mean in general in the United States, here's everything we've done wrong today versus here's everything we've done right today, right? That's a big cultural piece.
Exactly. There's for every workplace, there's a huge potential in telling your employees every time they make a difference for somebody somewhere.
I just think that's such a crucial point for whoever's listening, right? Because I think we can apply that whether we're doing volunteer work in an organization and we see things, right? Like you can sometimes feel like, are we even doing anything here when you're in that grassroots place?
Exactly.
So, Alex, tell us, like, what's the personal or professional achievements in this area that you're most proud of? I know you were talking about head count. I'd love to hear more about that. I'm sure people who are listening would love, but what are you most proud of?
I'm most proud of whenever somebody tells me that something I've said or written or a video I've put out makes a difference and has helped them. This is hilarious. So I got contacted, this was last summer, out of the blue. A man I've never heard about before has a company had just sold his company in the US. Yeah. And he was coming to Copenhagen on vacation, and he just wanted to tell me that he'd read my book about 10 years ago, and it was one of the main reasons why his company had been so successful. Yeah. So he was like, can I buy you lunch? I was, of course. And then I got the whole story, and I did a talk at a bank in South Africa. And this lady came up after my talk and said that she had never realized that it was even possible to have a job you enjoy. Like that was a completely new idea for her.
Yeah, I love that. So, in your book, Leading with Happiness, you explore how happiness can be a leadership strategy. Can you maybe share another story about a leader who transformed their organization by prioritizing happiness?
Yes, there are so many. I mentioned one of my favorite examples, and I interviewed him for the book, Bob Chapman. Have you heard of him?
I have heard of Bob Chapman.
There you go. He's fantastic. So he wrote a fantastic book called Everybody Matters. I highly recommend it. And he's the CEO of Barry Waymiller, which is a huge industrial company based in St. Louis, but operate all over the world. And Bob used to be like this numbers-driven, results-oriented, profits-driven CEO that was all he cared about. That's what he had been taught. He had an MBA. That's all he'd learned. And then at some point he has this awakening where he realized that, hey, people are important. And then he starts putting people first. If you make the world better, you're going to make more money than if you didn't. Ray Anderson of Interface Carpets is another great example. He wrote a book called Confessions of a Radical Industrialist, which I also highly recommend. And also his talks are on YouTube.
Yeah, these are two great books. We'll be sure for our listeners who might be traveling or commuting that we'll put links in so you can always come back and refer to those in the show notes. Alex, I can't wait to ask you our quickfire questions because I think I'm going to be completely surprised by the answers. But before we get there, as you kind of look towards the future, especially with AI and remote working kind of coming more and more, what do you envision as the evolution of happiness at work in the next 5 to 10 years?
Oh, that's such a great question. So the one thing that will change workplaces over the next 5 to 10 years is you and me, people. We're facing two big crises in the world right now. One is global warming, which is we're at the point now where we need to act and act quickly. And more people are waking up to that and demanding action. And the other one is we have a mental health crisis. It's especially acute in young people. If you survey people today about, how do you think the economy will be in the future? Most people say it'll be worse. How do you think the environment will be? Most people will say worse. That we cannot live without hope. We cannot live without optimism. So people will demand change, and people will demand change from our workplaces as well. So what we need and what we're seeing more and more, and this is where the optimism comes in, is workplaces who commit themselves to making the world better, to restoring that hope in humanity, to making sure that people say that if I take a job at this company and I work hard there for a number of years, my work will in some way make the world better. And that's what we're seeing more of. We're seeing more and more of. We're seeing companies commit themselves to making the world better. Patagonia is a great example. Yvonne Chouinard's book called Let My People Surf is also fantastic. Another book recommendation for you. So that's going to be the main thing that'll drive change in workplaces over the next 5 to 10 years. And you're seeing this with the young generations already coming into the workplace, where they demand good working conditions, but they also demand meaningful work that is making the world better.
And work-life balance, and a better work-life balance.
Work-life balance, they want fair and equitable salaries. They want a workplace that is diverse and inclusive.
I think there was something you just said in there where I was like, there's our show title, Alex. It always kind of comes up to the surface, but we're looking for workplaces that restore hope. I think that for all of our leaders listening, for all of our folks listening, that is so powerful because I think you're right. And listen, this idea of hope, I think, is a really big one. And I think even as I just listened to you say that, and I just kind of step back and look at what's happening globally, people are detached from that. It feels so hopeless, to your point, about global warming, about mental health, coming out of COVID.
And I just want to make a point that there are some people who want us to be hopeless and have given up in advance. And we can't let those people win.
Because there's profits in that sometimes. There's profits in that for some folks.
Yeah, there's political power in people being apathetic and having given up in advance. But here's why I'm optimistic. 3 trillion, it's an estimate, but it's like a napkin calculation for, back of the napkin calculation for how many hours human beings work every year. Yeah, let's say there are 7 billion people in the world, right? Let's say 3 billion of them have a full-time job, and in a full-time job, you work like approximately 1,000 hours a year. That comes out to 3 trillion, 3,000 billion hours. Imagine if most workplaces committed themselves to making the world better. And most of those 3 trillion hours were spent in jobs that were in the service of creating a better world, of restoring that hope. There is nothing we can't achieve if our businesses are willing to be part of the solution. And there is nothing we can achieve if they won't. Because let's face it, like a problem like global warming was created mostly by businesses. They drove that. They burned most of the fossil fuels.
Yeah, and I think I heard you in there that it's 1,000 hours per person, roughly, right? So to just think about that of like, how do I want to spend my 1,000 hours? I mean, if it's a bank account, right? If we looked at it as a bank account and roughly you get how many years of active working, right? Because obviously children aren't going to work. And obviously as we get older, that's going to diminish. So how do you want to spend your hours? I think that's because for me, there is the part that companies and organizations control. And then there's what's my participation in it, right? Like I do make a choice, to your point, about where I work, and we can get into the equity and sometimes what kind of choices do I have in all of those pieces. But for many folks, there is a what are you choosing and how are you choosing to spend your 1,000 hours? And that piece is super critical. So I can't wait to ask you these quick fires. Alex, tell us, what's the latest book or television show that's caught your attention? Why is it standing out for you? We want to know, what's the media you are consuming?
I won't mention the latest. I'll mention the one that has really, really resonated with me. The Good Place.
Okay.
Have you seen The Good Place?
No.
Oh my, you got it. It's amazing. It's on Netflix here in Denmark. I don't know about the rest of the world. Ted Danson, Kristen Bell. The story opens with she dies and she wakes up in the afterlife and she's told she's in the good place. Yeah. But then she turns out that she's there by mistake. Yeah, she was a dirtbag from Arizona. She was supposed to go to the bad place. And now she has to like find out how to earn her place in the good place. So it's really an exploration of what does it mean to live a good life? What does it mean to be a good person? But making the show, so the show is called The Good Place. And Mike Schur, who's who created the show, he says, if we make a show called The Good Place, working on it needs to be amazing. So he created a culture for the people working on that show. And if you know anything about, media productions, this is not typical, where people felt seen, included, heard. Everybody could come up with their contributions. Working on that show really comes through. So that's my number one recommendation, is absolutely The Good Place.
Can't wait to go check it out. How about, this is the question I'm going to be really intrigued by. If you could have dinner with any historical or contemporary leader, who would you choose? But what is the one question you would want to ask?
Oh man, there are so many. I would love to sit down with, this is a new one, and I don't know about him yet, but it's the man who started the company that now is known as Panasonic. I have his name here somewhere, a Japanese business leader. I'll look that up. But anyway, he founded something called humanistic management, humanistic leadership, which again puts the human being first. He's no longer alive, sadly, but I would love to sit down and talk about, so what does that look like? How do you come up with an idea like that? especially in Japan, where the business culture is very different. And how do you do that in practice? He's really credited with having massively influenced business culture in Japan and around the world. Humanistic leadership.
What's the hobby or activity that fills you with joy, Alex? What do you just lose all sense of time and you wish you could spend all of your time doing?
Swing dancing.
We love it.
I took it up with my girlfriend 7 years ago, and we were like, let's try this. And it went from hobby to passion to obsession very quickly. And what's so great about this is, first of all, it's the dance. It's an African-American dance created in New York in the 1920s and 30s. It's a dance based on joy. And of course, being Black in America in the 1920s and 30s, not a great time. And that joy, it is the most joyful dance I know of. Partly that, and then the community is amazing. So I've been swing dancing in Sydney, Hong Kong, all over the world. It's physical, it's high tempo, it's a lot of fun. And then you just do it with people who are just also there to dance and have fun. It's amazing.
I love this. And who knew, I think swing dancing has its own subculture here in the United States, but until you said it, it wouldn't occur to me that it really has expanded beyond, right?
If anybody's interested, there's a documentary called Alive and Kicking about the culture of swing dancing that I highly recommend.
I love that. Alex, how can people find you, learn more, find your books? You've written, by the way, we didn't get into all of them. I think you've written 5 books.
Yes, the best place, you can find us at woohooinc.com, our website. I have a blog called positivesharing.com. And if somebody would like to connect, I would love to connect on LinkedIn. You can absolutely find me on LinkedIn, and please do connect. I would love to hear from you.
Alex, it has been a pure joy having you on. Next time I'm in Copenhagen, I too will be sending an email asking if I can take you to dinner, because I would love to pick your brain. I am not a swing dancer, but I could give it a whirl, I suppose. You just never know. I could give it a whirl. For all of our listeners, thank you so much for tuning into Mindful Management, creating a trauma-informed work environment. As we mentioned, we will put links to Alex, his LinkedIn, all of his books, and several of the books and TV shows that he mentioned and movies in our call today. If you need more resources and helpful tools, please head over to www.chefaloconsulting.com. And if you enjoyed today's discussion, show your support by liking, commenting, following, and reviewing this episode on your favorite podcast platform. Your feedback matters. Our community matters. And we want to bring content that helps you in any way that we can. We'd love to hear from you. So drop a comment on Spotify or YouTube. Share what topics you'd like us to cover or who you'd like to see as our next guest. It's how we found Alex, by the way. And if you or someone you know would make a great guest, check the form in the show notes of this episode. Always looking for new people. Thanks again for listening. And until next time, remember, one step at a time, we can do hard things and we can bring more joy to the workplace. Thanks so much, everybody. Thanks again, Alex.
This was great. I really enjoyed this.
Mindful Management, creating a trauma-informed work environment, is brought to you by Chefalo Consulting. To learn more about Chefalo Consulting and our trauma-informed change management and professional development solutions, please visit chefaloconsulting.com. That's Chefalo, CHEFALO, consulting.com. Make sure you don't miss these transformative conversations by subscribing to Mindful Management wherever you get your podcast. Thanks for listening. And remember, change happens one step at a time.